Hello everyone and welcome back to a brand new video of Fox Reacts. Today we're checking out a new vid from Popcross Studios of what if Spider-Man and Batman characters were combined into one. Let's check it, let's hop in and see what's going on.
Every year for the last few years, I've done a drawing of Spider-Bat, my fusion blend of Spider-Man and Batman. And to be totally honest, I just wasn't super interested in the idea of drawing him again this year. But what I was very interested in doing was doing more stories set in that universe, and designing more allies and villains for Spider-Bat. So, while today's episode isn't going to have a new drawing of Spider-Bat, what it will have is some of the characters that I've referenced in past Marvel DC Fusion episodes but never drawn before, as well as some brand new characters to come up against or meet up with Wayne Parker. Personally, I think this is going to be a little bit more fun than just drawing the same guy again, and I'll do my best to make these cool enough and fun enough that you all agree. Hit like if you want, subscribe if you feel like, but either way, enjoy the show.
Let's do.
Selena Stacy was having a very strange week. To be fair, she rarely had what most people would consider a normal week, seeing as how she spent much of her days swinging around her home city, fighting crime and robbing the occasional corrupt business tycoon dressed as the infamous Spider-Cat. But
Spider-Cat.
This week was on another level. One minute she was investigating the latest schemes of the infinitely wealthy and underhanded billionaire Wilson Luthor, and the next she was caught in the fire of some machine he'd had built that blasted her into what she eventually realized had to be another dimension. The city she appeared in seemed very similar to her home of New Gotham, and was even called the same. But from looking through local news, then scouring through the internet for any mention of her past actions, or those of Wilson Luthor, soon revealed the truth of what had happened to her. Selena didn't seem to exist here. There was no news of her police chief father's death when she was young, the foster home she was raised in where she learned to steal didn't seem to exist, and any searches of Spider-Cat auto-corrected to Spider-Bat, and showed results of a vigilante that seemed to be this universe's version of her. Searching for Wilson Luthor, with various terms relating to him added in, eventually resulted in her finding information on some equally wealthy man named Loxie Lutherson, as well as a local politician in New Gotham named Wilson Dent, who'd had half his face majorly burned off by an alleged local supervillain called the Devil Cry. Many of the people Selena was seeing in her searches had similarities to heroes and villains she knew from her world, but none of them were quite right. She started to think about why Wilson Luthor in her dimension had been building a machine to transport people between dimensions. The last thing he'd said to her before she was shot away was, "It's not always about the money, Spider-Cat." What did he mean by that? What was he after this time? But it would be some time before she ever got answers to her questions. Selena didn't know where to start looking for a way back to her own reality, but she figured a good person to ask for help was this Spider-Bat, who she was picturing just being a male version of herself. The news she read all colored him as a dangerous criminal vigilante, and while nothing she saw showed irrefutable proof that he'd ever stolen anything or killed anyone, she assumed he was like her, a vigilante who remained on the fringes of the hero community, fought the crime lords she felt needed fighting for the greater good, while stealing what she wanted for herself from those she deemed unworthy of their own wealth and power. She decided her best next move was to track down this Spider-Bat and see how much they truly had in common, and she'd soon find that it wasn't quite as much as she'd think.
Other than Spider, you don't really share anything. You're a cat, he's a bat.
Tracking down the Spider-Bat took a few days because he seemed as good at hiding in the shadows as—
Now this is gonna be a good one. We got Man-Bat, and I don't know who this is, but it's gonna be good because we got Man-Bat.
Selena was. But eventually she caught wind of a battle going on across this universe's New Gotham, and she swung on after it. Selena's wrist-mounted grapple hooks and acrobatic skills from years of gymnastics, then years more of vigilante work, got her onto the scene pretty fast. At first, she didn't see the other spider, but soaring between buildings was some kind of human-bat hybrid that sort of resembled the lizard bat from her universe. While this bat was watching his back, Selena swung up and kicked him right out of the air. He flopped onto a building top,
But
where
good
she
hit.
then landed too, but the bat was up again quickly, baring his massive fangs at her. He snarled and just repeated in a grim voice, "Feed, feed, feed!" He leapt at her and she was ready to
Some
dodge,
kind of
but then a barrage of
man
goopy
bats.
webbing splattered down onto the bat and pinned him to the roof. A figure shot down onto the building and hammered a fist into the bat's head, and he was knocked out cold. Just the man she'd been looking for, Spider-Bat, stood up and said, "You'd been doing so well, Kirkland. What happened?" He looked over at Selina and thanked her for her help. He explained that the villain they'd just taken down was once a doctor named Morbius Kirkland, who the media had long since dubbed
Oh my God,
the Vampire
it's Morbius.
Bat. And
It's
of all
Morbius
Spider-Bat's
Bat.
villains, Vampire Bat certainly was one of them. Kirkland had once been a world-leading researcher on bats, believing he could extract from them and their biology a cure for a disease he'd had since he was young, as well as find a way to give people the sonar senses of a bat. And in a way he succeeded. He used himself as a test subject and turned himself into a bloodthirsty bat-human hybrid. He'd gotten his bloodlust under control for some time, but something must have set him off that day, as that night he'd been on the hunt for a meal once again. Selina could tell that, while explaining all that, Spider-Bat had been analyzing her attire and trying to decipher who exactly she was. She decided to cut off his guessing and explain her situation. Spider-Bat was fascinated by her story. He had minimal experience with the multiverse. A while back, a really annoying mech designer from another dimension had teamed up with him to help take down a villain of his called the Ice Goblin, but besides that, Spider-Bat had little information on other dimensions. Still, this Wilson Luthor she described did sound very similar to a villain Spider-Bat was actively investigating, the politician she'd read about, Wilson Dent. He was a frontrunner to become the mayor of New Gotham, and Spider-Bat was an ally of Devilcry, who is far from the villain the News and Dent claimed her to be, so he knew that Dent was actually a thieving murderer who was just incredibly good at covering up his misdeeds. Spider-Bat knew it was a stretch, but suggested that perhaps this universe's Wilson was working on something similar to the machine from Spider-Cat's world, and perhaps that could get her home. It was the only lead they had, so the Spiders dropped Vampire Bat at a police station, then swung off to Wilson Dent's latest base of operations.
So it's called Vampire Bat. Alright, not bad. Definitely better than Mole Bat.
Quick interruption here to say that along with the brand new giant ink bundle that I have up on my Teespring store, I have put up a new Just Cool Stuff poster. And if you've never seen one of those before, my Just Cool Stuff posters are posters that each have 20 different of my favorite drawings on them. So if you want a whole bunch of my art on your wall, but you don't want to buy a whole bunch of posters, these ones are perfect. But anyway, back into more story and art. Let's go.
Cut. Well, back, and this time we have Scalpion. That's what I'm calling it, because we got Scarecrow and Scorpion.
Had been working diligently to prove Dent's criminal activity to the world before the election for mayor. Spider-Bat had no interest in seeing a crime lord run New Gotham from political office, so he'd been following Dent's actions and knew that Dent and his lackeys were currently running operations out of one of his front companies, a business that claimed to be working on a drug to help people get over intense phobias. But Spider-Bat had his doubts about their actual intentions. They snuck in carefully and used the vents to get down to the basement, where there certainly were people working on some kind of fear drug, but given the gas canisters and weaponry it was being loaded into, the Spiders both quickly saw proof that this wasn't intended to help anyone other than Dent.
I was literally
just about to say that. They both crept through the shadows, searching for any sign of a machine similar to the one Wilson from Cat's universe had been working on, but there was no sign. That lead was quickly fizzling away, but while still believing themselves in hiding, Cat felt something sharp prick the back of her neck. She whipped around to see her father. She was confused and didn't know if this was him from this universe or what, but he soon said, "How could you become a disgusting vigilante, Selina? I was raising you to be better." Then, to her horror, his face started to decay and shrivel away. "You're an embarrassment to our family, Selina." Her heart was pounding and her head spinning, but then Spider-Bat leapt past her and punched her father in the face. A tail suddenly sprung up from her father's back and thrust towards the bat. He ducked under it, rolled over to Selina, pulled a small canister from his belt, and sprayed it into her nose. She took a deep breath in, and the spinning in her mind slowly stopped. The image of her decaying father vanished, and she could see that the figure before them both was actually a man in tattered rags and a mechanical armor with a tail springing from his back that at the end had a needle dispensing some kind of green liquid. This was Jonathan Gargan. He was a disgraced psychiatrist who'd faced criminal charges and lost his medical license after testing dangerous fear toxins on his patients. He'd taken up a career as a private eye soon after to make ends meet, and soon found he could still use his fear compounds in his new line of work. He was often hired to find proof of adultery or some other misdeed, and he could secretly inject the people he followed with his fear compounds, then, in their horrified state, get them to simply confess to any unsavory acts they were involved in. This eventually put him on Spider-Bat's radar, and Spider-Bat had Gargan locked away for a few years, before Wilson Dent got him released, funded Gargan's work, and gave him enough resources to weaponize his fear toxins. Dent then sent him to kill Spider-Bat and any other vigilantes that tried to get in the way of Dent's work. Gargan eventually took on the alias of the Scarpion, and became one of Spider-Bat's more regular villains. Luckily, because of this, Spider-Bat had developed cures to his toxins, so Selina was in her right mind and back in the fight alongside the Bat quickly. It became a brawl through the lab, with workers fleeing and alarms blaring. Together, the Spiders got Gargan to his knees. Kat still had the image in her mind of Gargan being her decaying father, and it made her livid that he'd put her through that. She tore off his mask, raised her clawed hand, and swung it down right for his throat. But Spider-Bat snatched her hand off its path. Spider-Bat was alarmed that she was going to kill him, and Kat was confused as to why he wouldn't let her kill one of his villains. Turned out their crime-fighting tactics weren't so similar after all. Selina soon found out that despite what the media had to say about Spider-Bat, he'd never actually stolen anything from anyone, and he certainly had never killed any of his villains. Something she was more than willing to do herself in the right circumstances. But their disagreement over Gargan's fate was soon interrupted as the big man himself, Wilson Dent, marched into the room and said, "So, Spider-Bat, Kirkland and Gargan weren't enough of a distraction for you, huh? I guess I'll handle you myself."
Now please call him Kingface. That would be perfect, because we got Two-Face and Kingpin. It has to be Kingface. Come on.
Before entering the base, Spider-Bat had explained to Kat that Dent was just as much of a physical threat as he was a manipulative criminal mastermind. He was 6'4" and around 400 pounds. Spider-Bat didn't know if Dent actually had super strength, but he hit as hard as almost any of the Bat's villains, and would fight as dirty as he had to. Dent had worked his way up quickly through the criminal underground in New Gotham, and all the while had convinced the majority of people that he was an upstanding citizen who would be the perfect person to lead New Gotham into a brighter future. He practically owned the media and the police, and had both sides of the political spectrum eating out of the palm of his hands, despite being after nothing more than power for himself. In the early days of his criminal career, Dent had gotten a man named Lamar Murdoch killed. Lamar had refused to sell his dojo to Dent, where fighting tournaments took place that many criminal groups would participate in, and Dent wanted control over it. After killing Murdoch to acquire the dojo through other means, his daughter, Dinah, went after Dent and caused an accident that horrifically burned half of Dent's face, making him a very hard man to look at. But, Dent being the master manipulator he was, had even managed to spin this in his favor, using his media influence to convince people that any critics of Dent were just put off by his appearance, directing people away from thinking about the genuine critiques of his political platform. He'd even purchased the New Gotham Mets baseball team to further solidify the city's love for him. Spider-Bat wanted nothing more than to take this man down, but he wasn't willing to go the same route Selina thought best. A quick slash across the throat. Regardless, they had a fight on their hands. Bat webbed down Scarpion, and they both attacked Dent. Selina went in cocky and flew straight for a head-on strike, but he easily caught her fist and headbutted her so hard she practically got knocked out right there. Bat had more experience with Dent and tried to get around him to strike from behind, but Dent was still shockingly quick for his size and whipped his cane back, striking Spider-Bat from the air. Selina shook off her blow and slashed at Dent's ankles. He raised his foot up out of the way and stomped down onto her. She let the foot come down onto her, and she was pretty sure he cracked her ribs, but she was able to catch his leg, then tear through his Achilles tendon with her claws. He stumbled back, and she shot her grapple hook right at his shoulder and yanked. She intended to pull him down, but he was too sturdy, so she adapted and pulled herself to him and hammered her foot into his nose. He slammed back into the wall and spat a glob of blood from his mouth. He remarked that she was much more of a brutal fighter than Spider-Bat. He then plucked a gold coin off the top of his cane, flicked it into the air, and said he'd let fate decide if she was going to die that night. Boy. Before the coin could come down, though, Spider-Bat shot over and kicked Dent's legs from under him. He slammed to the ground, and both the spiders leapt up to get a strike on him, but he rolled away from them both and was on his feet quickly. He cocked his fists as if ready to continue.
Whoa, hold up right there. His Achilles tendon was slashed. So unless he's somehow already put a boot on that foot, he's not doing a lot of that stuff. If you don't know what the Achilles tendon is, if the Achilles tendon is cut, your whole foot is useless. So unless he's got some immediate medical attention going on, he's not getting up. Well, not immediately anyways. He still has at least one good foot.
Knew the battle, but then heard sirens from outside. He snatched his coin and ran from the room. The spiders both tried to follow him, but he slammed a button that started closing blast doors behind him. The last thing they heard from him was,
"How is he running?
Tomorrow's papers aren't gonna paint you too kindly, new spider." A green mist started spraying from the ceiling, and the spiders didn't wait around to see what it did. They fled back through the vents and searched the perimeter for Dent, but he was nowhere to be seen. They were no closer to getting Dent's criminal activities made public, or to getting Selina home, and on top of that, they weren't so sure their crime-fighting approaches were going to work well together. Selina would stay in this dimension for some time, and occasionally work alongside Spider-Bat, but the relationship between the spiders would never be as clean or simple as either of them hoped. Still, for the time being, this universe's new Gotham would largely benefit from having another crime-fighting spider swinging through the streets, seeking justice.
Well, I have to say, Kingface actually did pretty well. I don't think he ever named it, so I'm naming it Kingface.
I knew it was going to be tough to compete with the episode I did last year of Spider-Man Batman villain fusions, but
I remember that.
Quite happy with how this turned out. I don't know if I like this one better or the last one better, but if you haven't seen the previous episode of my Spider-Man Batman villain fusions, I'll link it in the cards, along with just my whole playlist of Marvel DC fusions. And of course, I would love more suggestions for other Spider-Man Batman fusions, or just other Marvel DC fusions, or other things I could fuse Marvel or DC characters with. I mean, heck, I've now opened up a whole nother universe of Marvel DC fusions. So in Spider-Cat's universe, I could even fuse characters that I've used previously in this series.
Oh, different
so tons of room for new suggestions in the comments. But besides that, that's all for today, except of course for ending this video on some kind of positive or inspiring note. And the thought I want to leave people with today is actually an old Japanese samurai proverb. And it says, do not speak badly of yourself, for the warrior within hears your words and is lessened by them. Kind of a common thing for me to talk about at the end of a video, but I
actually like that saying a lot. What you got to say, Curtis?
Like the warrior addition to it. Thought that was pretty cool. I hope that's inspiring to someone out there. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. I love you all, and I'll see you all in the next episode on Monday. Goodbye.
And with that, that is what we're ending off today's video. So, I want you all to remember to like, comment, and subscribe for more. Down in the description will be a link to the original video, so remember to support the original creator and all they do. And I'll see all of you folks next time. Peace out.